Welcome back to the Dark Archive, where we explore the darkest corners of human vengeance. Tonight's file is a chilling look into how easily a man can be driven to pure, calculated madness, and how ordinary people, through their cruel indifference, seal their own fate. This is not just a murder spree, it's a grotesque, televised lesson in human apathy, orchestrated by a man who lost everything to fire and found salvation only in blood. The title of tonight's horror is simple, yet final. Open the box to survive. Kill the lights. Put on your headphones. You are about to witness the ultimate sacrifice for a meaningless prize. But be warned, once this game begins, there are no refunds, no mercy, and only one winner. Pray you are just listening. Many might label what I feel as misanthropy, but no, that isn't quite right. Misanthropy is often defined as a hatred of humanity without a specific cause, a general disdain for the species. Stopwatch, but I have reasons. My hatred is distinct, calculated, and deeply rooted in a specific scar on my soul. Perhaps I heard that definition somewhere, or maybe I'm wrong about the terminology, but the semantics don't matter anymore. The catalyst for this irreversible transformation in my psyche was a single event, a moment in time that severed my connection to the human race. I won't drag this out with unnecessary suspense, I will simply tell you that this event robbed me of the only person I truly loved. It started a chain reaction within me that will only cease when I am lying cold and motionless in a wooden box. On that day, I lost my father. He didn't just die. He burned alive inside his car, screaming for help that never came. I don't know all the forensic details of how or why the mechanical failure occurred. All I know is that there was a traffic accident, a collision. The car caught fire almost instantly. My father was pinned against the steering wheel, the metal frame crushing his legs, trapping him as the flames began to lick at his skin. He couldn't get out on his own. At least, that's what the police told me in the sterile, fluorescent-lit room after the incident. At first, my brain refused to process the information. I couldn't grasp that the charred remains they were talking about belonged to my father. The person responsible for the crash, the one who struck him, had fled the scene immediately. He is still being sought, or so the detective in charge of the case claimed. But I know how the system works. I know that while he tells me they are searching, he is likely sitting in his office, feet up, watching pornography and sipping stale beer, ignoring the file gathering dust on his desk. Stopwatch. After that realization, panic set in. A heavy, suffocating depression crawled into my skull and made a nest there. I stopped eating. I stopped going to university. I abandoned my job. I started drinking, trying to drown the image of fire that played on a loop in my mind. My father was everything to me. He wasn't just a parent, he was my best friend, my mentor, my comrade. I could tell him anything, my darkest fears, my stupidest mistakes, and I always received support and understanding in return, never judgment. He raised me alone. My mother had also burned out when I was very young, though not from fire, but from chemicals. She died of a heroin overdose. My life had a heavy start, a rough hand dealt from the beginning, but my father carried everything on his back. He shielded me. And this is how he died. It shouldn't be like this. I have always understood that people die from old age, from long battles with sickness, that is the natural order. But I could not, and cannot, accept the fact that he was healthy as an ox, built like a tank, with decades of life ahead of him. And because of some scumbag on the road, it all ended in ash. Stopwatch. That piece of filth is walking free somewhere right now, breathing the air my father can no longer breathe. I hope my father's ghost visits him every night, wrapping cold, smoky hands around his throat. But the most wretched, vile feeling I have isn't even because of the driver. It comes from the fact that this happened in the very center of the city, in broad daylight. And do you know what I saw? When the police invited me in, I watched the footage. Not from CCTV, but from the mobile phones of witnesses. Not a single bastard even tried to help him. The car didn't explode instantly. The fire started small. Any one of them could have run up, tried to pry the door, used a fire extinguisher, or at least tried to pull him out. But no. They all stood there like statues with glowing screens, filming. They filmed him screaming in agony. I will repeat this because it haunts me. Not one person stepped forward. Stopwatch. It was the city center, crowded with people, and for them, it was just content. One video was better than the next. In the background of the recordings, you can hear their voices. Some feigned pity, muttering, "Oh my God," while others, "God damn them," were laughing. They were laughing at how cool the fire looked. And then, the car was fully engulfed. My father screamed louder, a sound that no human should ever make, and then, silence. Someone finally called the fire department and an ambulance, but it was far too late. They arrived only to extinguish a charred metal skeleton and a body that had fused with the seat. The crowd just kept filming. This is the mentality of our society. 80% of people live by the principle, "It's not my problem." No one wants to help. No one wants to get their hands dirty. They wouldn't lend $1 to a starving man even if their wallet was bursting. Saving a life? Forget it. People never think about the pain of others. As long as their own ass is warm and comfortable, nothing else matters. That is why there is chaos everywhere. This mentality will only change when this entire rotten generation dies out. I'm rambling. I apologize. You know, in the state I was in back then, the darkest thoughts took root. I thought about suicide constantly, repeatedly. But those thoughts usually came when I was lying alone in the empty 3-bedroom apartment, in absolute silence, staring at the ceiling where the shadows danced. Eventually, the desire for death was replaced by a cold, sharp desire for revenge. Stopwatch. At the morgue, I had to pay a significant bribe to the morticians to make my father look somewhat presentable, to hide the burns so I could say goodbye. Seeing him there, broken and still, I sobered up a little. I thought burying him would bring closure, that the stone in my soul would fall away. But when I saw the coffin lowered into the ground, it only got worse. I was the only mourner. Just me and the drunk gravediggers, standing in the mud. That evening, I drank. I drank like a man possessed, consuming anything that burned my throat. I sat in a dive bar near my house, drunkenly explaining to the bartender exactly what I thought of humanity. Eventually, I got too loud, someone punched me in the head, and I was thrown out into the gutter. That was my wake, my memorial for my father. I know it was wrong, but I just wanted to forget. Instead, the hatred only clarified. The next day passed in a haze of a terrible hangover, a physical punishment I won't bore you with. But the day after that, that was interesting. I woke up early, my head strangely clear. I ate breakfast, smoked 3 cigarettes in a row, watching the smoke curl into the air, and suddenly, I understood my purpose. At that time, I was still relatively sane compared to what I am now. My thoughts were focused entirely on vengeance, and my plans were frighteningly practical. Yes, I was ready to kill. And by revenge, I didn't mean petty vandalism or a fistfight. No. I was serious. I had nothing left to lose. No friends, no family, no future I cared about. I was completely alone in the universe. I began to execute my plan that very morning. I spent the entire day scouring the darkest corners of the internet. I researched the best methods for temporarily paralyzing a human being, searched for secluded locations, and made a list of necessary inventory. I drew diagrams and flowcharts. I went to the bank and withdrew every cent from my father's savings account. I took out several high-interest loans that I had absolutely no intention of ever repaying. I gathered all my own cash. Then, I went shopping. I bought heavy-duty rope, hunting knives, industrial saws, plastic sheeting, and a dozen other items that would look very suspicious if placed together on a conveyor belt. Stopwatch. I went to different pharmacies, buying sedatives and sleeping pills in quantities that required hopping from store to store. I stocked up fully. With the remaining money, I bought an old, rusted sedan off a classified site, something generic, nondescript. I know how to drive, I have a license. Now, I was mobile. The next step was intelligence gathering. I went to the police station again. With a little smooth talking and a subtle bribe, I managed to get copies of the video files, under the guise of needing closure. My real goal was to analyze them, to identify the faces and voices of the people who stood there filming my father burning. But that was a task for tomorrow. Today, I drove out to the old sugar factory, way past the city limits. It had been abandoned since the collapse of the Soviet Union, a rotting industrial corpse in the middle of nowhere. It was perfect. Not a living soul for miles. I explored the ruins for an hour until I found the basement, a soundproof, concrete bunker deep underground. Ah, I haven't told you the best part yet. This isn't just a murder spree, it's going to be a show. A YouTube blog, if you will. I am going to find every single piece of filth that filmed my burning father, and I am going to film them. I will bring them all together. It will be live streamed. I'm sure the audience will be huge. To avoid immediate bans, I'll have to censor the gore slightly, but the message will be clear. I spent the entire evening setting up the room. I installed professional lighting, dragged in old furniture I found in the upper levels, and tested the acoustics. The soundproofing is impeccable, no one will hear them scream. I followed my plan down to the smallest detail. By the time I got back home, it was 3 a.m. The following day, I returned to the police station. With the help of a small sum borrowed from a predatory payday loan office and a very convincing sob story, I managed to get the geolocation data and contact info of the witnesses, everyone who had their camera on at the scene. Stopwatch. For the next 24 hours, I became a ghost in the machine. I analyzed their social media profiles, cross-referenced photos, mapped out who was friends with whom. A couple of idiots even had younger siblings who, with a little social engineering, happily leaked their brothers' and sisters' whereabouts to a stranger online. It was shockingly easy. I decided not to drag it out. I started with 2 young men I had tracked down. The first one I caught in the stairwell of his apartment building. He was coming home drunk in the evening, stumbling up the steps. A quick needle to the neck, and he went limp. I caught him before he hit the concrete, dragged him to the car, threw his phone SIM card into the sewer, and stuffed him into the trunk. The second target was slightly older. I ambushed him in his backyard while he was taking out the trash. Same method, needle, silence, SIM card destroyed, body in the trunk. I could have just killed them there, but where is the fun in that? No, that's too easy. I drove them to the factory and dragged them down to the basement. I bound them tightly, gagged them, and left them there in the dark. Just to be safe, I barred the heavy iron door from the outside with a steel pipe. Over the next 2 days, I hunted the rest. Some I lured out using fake profiles of attractive women. Others I snatched off the street or from dark entryways. The entryway method is really the most efficient. I even picked one girl up from a bar. I bought her a drink, charmed her, and she willingly got into my car. We went to my place, which turned out to be the factory. Standard scheme. In total, I collected 8 people. The first 2 I had captured were starving by the time the group was complete, so I graciously bought them a cheap loaf of bread and some mayonnaise. You should have seen them attack that food like animals. Oh, and I forgot to mention, among these 8 moral vacuums were a few girls. One was hideous, utterly repulsive inside and out, while the others were decent looking. In the downtime between kidnappings, I created the channel, designed the graphics, and set up VPNs and proxies to ensure the police couldn't trace the stream. When the victims finally woke up and the drugs wore off, the reality set in. They were in shock. They screamed, the girls cried and begged, struggling against the ropes that bound their hands and feet. But what was the point? Stopwatch. I want to emphasize this, I felt absolutely no pity. Not a drop. At first, I worried that I wouldn't be able to go through with it, that I was too weak, that my stomach would turn. But I was wrong. Looking at their terrified faces, I felt powerful. Sometimes, I feel like I might be going insane, but then I remember the fire. I have already visualized exactly how this will go. And what exactly will happen? Let me explain. I want them to suffer. I want them to feel the helplessness my father felt. So, I have devised a game. Out of these 8 people, only one can win. The winner will be allowed to leave, likely with horrific, life-altering injuries, but alive nonetheless. The rest? Well, the cameras are rolling. Welcome to the show. The arrangement in the basement was specific. They were to be seated around a heavy wooden table, secured tightly to their chairs. Their hands, however, I left unbound. They needed them free to perform the tasks. But to ensure no unified uprising, their chairs were chained together, creating a grim human daisy chain. Their sole purpose now was to open the matchboxes I would place before them and execute whatever instructions they found inside. I knew what was written on those tiny scrolls of paper, they did not. And to ensure compliance, I introduced a very persuasive motivator. If any of them decided to act foolishly or refuse a task, they would immediately lose half their head. Stopwatch. Just yesterday, I purchased a massive, heavy-bladed machete for exactly that purpose. As I had told my audience, both the captive one and the future digital one, only one person would leave this room alive. And for that lucky survivor, I had a very special surprise planned. We would begin tomorrow. Unfortunately, the live stream idea had to be shelved. For some reason, the mobile internet signal down here in this concrete bunker had completely vanished. A minor setback. I had multiple cameras and the confiscated phones of these fine upstanding citizens. I would record everything from multiple angles and edit it together later into a proper, high-quality production. I unlocked the heavy metal door and stepped into the holding room where they had been stewing for days. The stench hit me instantly, a thick, miasmic cocktail of stale urine, unwashed bodies, and palpable, shivering fear. Someone had clearly lost control of their bladder. "All right," I announced brightly, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the gloom. "Time to start filming. Let me go." "Who the hell are you, you psycho?" shouted the first one I had verified, the drunk from the stairwell. I shone the light directly into his face, watching him squint. "You know, here's your main problem," I said calmly. "You're yelling, 'Let me go,' not 'let us go.' What about the others? You don't think about them at all, do you? Why are you such a pathetic, selfish piece of trash? And who are you?" asked that repulsive girl I mentioned earlier, her voice trembling but defiant. "Me? I am the son of the man who burned alive in his car." The realization hit them like a physical blow. I watched as faces slackened, eyes widened in dawning horror. They remembered. Of course they remembered. That wasn't me," the drunk stammered, backtracking desperately. "I didn't set anything on fire. Let me go, please, I beg you." "No, you didn't light the match," I agreed, my voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "But when he was screaming in agony, when he was cooking inside that metal coffin, you did absolutely nothing. And not just you. All of you here. None of you lifted a finger to help a dying human being. Was it really so hard?" I paused, letting the accusation hang in the foul air. "No, of course not. The most important thing was getting that story posted to your damn Instagram, wasn't it? Well, don't worry. We're about to make a very interesting story right now." What are you going to do?" one of the prettier girls whispered, tears streaming down her impeccably plastered makeup. "Better to ask what you are going to do," I corrected her with a thin smile. "We are going to film a highly engaging and entertaining segment about how you vermin will fight for your miserable lives. The struggle will be horrific, I promise you, but very watchable. I think my followers will love it. I'll get a lot of likes." "You're AF, King Sicko," spat the drunk, finding his courage again. "You're just polluting normal society. Is that clear to you now?" I laughed, a genuine, deep laugh that echoed strangely in the small room. "You people contribute absolutely nothing of value. You only know how to f.k., guzzle booze, and stare into your phones for hours on end. That's it. You're garbage. Useless consumers incapable of anything real." "And what are you capable of?" retorted the ugly girl. "Oh, you'll see," I assured her. "I am bringing a great benefit to society by cleansing it of people like you. All right, enough chatter." I pulled out my kit. "Time for your shots. We begin tomorrow." Despite the renewed chorus of screams, curses, and pathetic begging, I was unwavering. I sedated them all, stacking them like cordwood until morning, and drove home. I slept like a baby, dreaming of nothing. The next morning, I drove back to the factory to execute the sentence. When I entered the room, the drugs had worn off, they were all awake. I had spent the previous evening taping the chains to their limbs to prevent too much noise, but as soon as I opened the door, they started rattling them frantically, a cacophony of metal on metal. "Stop it," I commanded, holding up the machete so it caught the light of the halogen lamps I'd set up. "Stop it right now, or I will cut your guts out and feed you your own shit." Silence fell instantly. I checked the camera angles, adjusted the lighting. The girls were crying silently, black rivers of mascara running down their cheeks. The guys were twitching periodically, still clinging to the desperate hope that this was some elaborate, sick prank. "Listen closely," I began, adopting the persona of a game show host. "I am going to bring in 30 matchboxes. Inside these boxes are tasks that you must complete. If you refuse a task, you are eliminated from the game. Permanently. I don't think I need to explain what that looks like." I tapped the flat of the machete against my palm. "Your chances are all equal. But remember, the victory of any one of you depends not only on your own efforts but also on the actions of your brothers and sisters in misfortune here. So, good luck to you all. I'll go get the boxes." I retrieved the bag of matchboxes from the other room. When I returned, I hit record on all the cameras. "We are rolling," I announced. "I'm going to untape your mouths now. If I hear one single squeak that isn't related to the game, you immediately get an extra task box. Let's go." I ripped the duct tape from their mouths roughly. The girls immediately started sobbing aloud, some already wetting themselves in terror. I'd even tried to make some of the boxes look festive. "Are you ready? Now, with your permission, I'll begin filming." I had spent the entire night writing these tasks. Honestly, even I was surprised by the depths of my own dark imagination. I decided to play on their anonymity. "I'll call you by number, going clockwise." Agreed? Agreed. "Number 1, let's go. Open it up. What did fate bring you?" The drunk guy, number 1, opened his box with trembling fingers. He stared at the tiny slip of paper, his face draining of all color. "Bite off my own finger," he read, his voice barely a squeak. "Oh, straight to the heart stuff. Very good." I picked up the machete. "You remember the consequences of refusal or failure, yes?" He nodded frantically, eyes locked on the blade. "Good. Begin. Please, let me go. I beg you. At least give us some food. We haven't eaten," he blubbered. "Well, you're about to eat," I said coldly. "But that's an unnecessary conversation. Here, catch." I tossed him a second matchbox. "Penalty box for talking. Open it." He opened the second box, his hands shaking so badly he almost dropped it. "Cut off my ear." "Excellent. Here are the scissors." I slid a pair of industrial shears across the table. "Come on. You can do it." The others watched in paralyzed horror, no one dared to make a sound. Number 1 looked at me, desperate to plead his case again, but the gleaming machete silenced him. He realized there was no other way out. He had to do it, or he would die right here. Slowly, agonizingly, he put his own pinky finger into his mouth, positioning it between his molars. He began to bite down. A guttural scream tore from his throat as blood began to pour from his lips. It was music to my ears. He was hesitant, not biting hard enough. Impatient, He suddenly slammed his other hand against his jaw, forcing his teeth shut with a sickening crunch. He bit completely through the bone. Tears streamed down his face, mixing with the blood gushing from his mouth as he spat the severed digit onto the table. "Come on now, the second box," I urged cheerily. "Don't stop now." Sobbing uncontrollably, he picked up the shears, raised them to his head, and began to cut. He screamed a little more, then fell silent, whimpering only occasionally like a kicked dog as he finished the job. "Okay, who's next?" "Ah, this lovely creature. Number 2. What's in your box?" She opened it, her hands shaking. "Set fire to the hair on my head. Here's a lighter." I slid a Zippo down the table. She ignited the lighter, weeping silently, and brought the flame to her long, hairsprayed locks. They caught instantly, flaring up like a torch. The room immediately filled with the acrid, sickening stench of burning hair. The girl shrieked in panic, batting at the flames. "What are you crying for?" I asked genuinely. "You got lucky. That's an easy one. Okay, next. Number 3, open up." I walked over to the third character as he read his scroll. "Chop off the hand of the neighbor on the right." "Damn, tough break," I tooted. "But go ahead, be a hero. Here's the tool." I threw a heavy woodsman's axe onto the table. What happened next surprised even me. The girl whose hair was still smoldering, number 2, the neighbor on the right, suddenly lunged. She grabbed the axe before number 3 could react and swung it with all her might, burying the blade deep into his skull. He dropped instantly, dead before he hit the floor, disappearing under the table. "Whoa! Good move, baby," I exclaimed, genuinely impressed. "Let's keep going." "Another lady. Number 4, come on." She opened her box and began to wail like a cow being led to slaughter. Cut off my breast." "Now that is interesting," I murmured, leaning in. "Here's a knife. Go on. Why are you doing this? What did we do to you?" "For what?" she screamed, hysterical. "That's exactly the point. You did absolutely nothing. Now come on, here's a penalty box for the chatter." She opened it, shoved a red-hot nail up my nose. "Wow, you really are unlucky, aren't you?" The girl picked up the knife. She pulled down the strap of her bra, sobbing uncontrollably. For times she brought the blade to her skin, her hand shaking violently, and 4 times she pulled it back. Finally, she threw the knife onto the table. "I can't do it. I can't. Your choice." I raised the machete high and brought it down in a single, powerful arc, splitting her head right down the middle. Her tiny brain splattered across the table and the person sitting next to her. Moving on. Another gentleman. Number 5. Open it. He read the paper, his voice devoid of hope. Drill into my own knee with a power drill. Would you look at that coincidence, I beamed, reaching under the table. I just happened to bring a drill along. The guy took the heavy tool. His face was slick with sweat, tears pouring from his eyes, but he didn't say a word. He knew better. He positioned the bit against his kneecap and pulled the trigger. The high-pitched whine of the drill and the wet crunch of bone echoed through the room. He began to convulse violently, then toppled off his chair, dropping the drill and splashing into the rapidly expanding pool of blood on the floor. Okay, next. Number 6. This was the second guy, the one whose little sister had sold him out. Open your prize. Hold palm on an electric stove for 3 minutes. Getting interesting. Where's the stove? Don't worry, I prepared everything in advance. I pulled a portable electric burner from under the table and hooked it up to a car battery. The coils quickly began to glow a menacing cherry red. At first, the guy just hesitated, crying softly, whispering for me to let him go. But I ignored him. I was enthralled by the unfolding scene. Come on, put it down. Or refuse. Your call. Suddenly, with a jerk, he slammed his palm down onto the glowing element. Another horrific scream filled the chamber, the sound of searing flesh sizzling loudly. He held it there for about 10 seconds before ripping it away, howling. Failure, I stated simply, and repeated the procedure I had used on the previous girl. Machete. Head split. Done. Only 2 people left whole, and 3 cripples, I noted, surveying the carnage. Okay, number 7. Let's open it. Gouge out my own eye and eat it. I silently tossed a knife in front of him. You sick psycho. What the F.K. are you doing? The young man roared through his tears, losing control. Does someone want another box? I don't understand, I said calmly. Go F.K. yourself with your boxes, you miserable bastard, he screamed. You know you only have a little bit left to live after this. I take it you refuse the boxes? I asked politely. Go F.K. yourself. You're brave, I see. Well, what can you do? I took the machete. First, I chopped off his hand. He shrieked, clutching the stump as blood sprayed across the room, mixing with the brains, urine, and other gore already painting the floor. What, you don't like the game? This is the cut off a hand challenge. You guys love challenges, right? Now, it's the cut off a leg challenge. I swung low and struck his shin. The leg flew to the side, severed cleanly. He screamed even louder, a sound that barely seemed human anymore, and then passed out from the overwhelming shock and pain. Now watch this, I said to the remaining few, positioning the blade. This is the cutthroat challenge. I gripped the machete tighter and drew the blade firmly across his neck, silencing him forever. So, you're the beauty left over, number 8, I turned to the final girl. She was sitting there, vibrating with terror as if she'd been dropped naked into Antarctica. Why are you shaking? Open the box. Do what's inside, and you live. Come on, sunshine. I realized, vaguely, that I was acting completely insane. A raving lunatic. Even my speech pattern felt strange, disconnected. But I couldn't stop. I was a passenger in my own body now. Open the box, I commanded. Pull out my own fingernails and eat them. Well, go for it. I took a pair of pliers from my bag and tossed them to her. She picked them up, sobbing and screaming simultaneously, and began to pull the nails from her left hand, one by one. She managed 2 before falling out of her chair, curling into a ball on the floor. Blood spurted from her ruined fingertips. She was screaming something, trying to form words, but I couldn't understand a damn thing over her shrieks. It didn't matter. I felt absolutely zero pity for any of them. Maybe I really had lost my mind. I don't know. I was just observing it all now. Suddenly, the pliers flew through the air and hit me in the chest. The girl whispered hoarsely, "I can't." I walked over, picked up the pliers, and crouched beside her. "Let me help you." Slowly, methodically, I pulled the remaining nails from each finger on both hands. She passed out from the shock somewhere around the fourth nail. When I was finished, I stood up and drove my hunting knife deep into her skull, just to be sure. "So, 3 remain alive," I said to the unconscious bodies on the floor, the earless drunk, the guy with the drilled knee, and the girl who burnt her hair and axed her neighbor. "What to do with you 3? Okay, let's do this. I'll give you more boxes. Do them, and you can go to all 4 corners of the earth." First, I addressed the gentleman, the earless number 1, who was barely conscious. "Kiss the iron." I grabbed an old-fashioned cast-iron clothing iron I had brought. I had to heat it on the electric stove. "Let's wait while it heats up." I turned to the guy who had drilled his knee. "Your turn." He was just drooling, staring blankly into a puddle of his own blood. "Can't do it. Too late to back out now." I picked up the drill, loaded a long self-tapping screw into the chuck, and drove it straight into his temple. "Okay, your turn to open one," I said to the last remaining girl, the one with the burnt hair, who was huddled under the table near the corpse she had created. "Shove a soldering iron up your ass." Wow, that's brutal. That's how the Nazis used to torture people, I think. Maybe I'm wrong. I'll plug it in, let it heat up. I turned back to the earless guy. "The iron is ready. Come on, kiss it deep. Like you kiss your girlfriend." I grabbed him by the hair and pressed the glowing flat surface of the iron against his face. His lips immediately fused to the scorching metal with a terrible hiss. The smell of burnt meat overwhelmed the room. He started to scream, but it was muffled because his mouth was welded shut. The iron was old and heavy. I let go of it. Gravity took over, and the iron fell to the floor, ripping his lips and half his face off with it. He passed out instantly from the trauma. I picked up the heavy iron from the floor and simply dropped it onto his head one more time. That was the end of his story. I turned to the girl under the table. "Well, looks like you won. We don't need the soldering iron anymore." "I congratulate you," I said, pulling a large jerry can of gasoline from the corner and beginning to splash its contents liberally around the room, coating the walls, the table, and the pile of bodies. "What? What are you doing?" she croaked, terrified, watching me douse the room in fuel. "I'm pouring gasoline. Can't you see?" "Why? Why? We have to clean this place up, don't we?" Did I win?" "You said I won. You said, congratulations. You'll free me, right?" she pleaded, her voice barely audible. I stopped pouring and looked at her, a matchbox in my hand. "Yes. I swear, you are going to free me. I swear to you, I will never tell a single soul what happened here. Please, listen to me," she stammered, scrambling backward on her hands and knees, slipping in the mixture of gasoline and blood that coated the concrete floor. Her eyes were wide, frantic, reflecting the dim light of the hallway. "I have money. I have savings. I can give you everything I have. Just, please, let me go. You said I won. I looked down at her, the last survivor of my little experiment. She looked pathetic, a broken doll covered in grime and the fluids of her fellow captives. Stopwatch. The fumes of the petrol were dizzying, a sharp chemical sting in the nose that promised purification. I struck a match against the side of the box. The small flame flared to life, dancing in the stagnant air, casting long, flickering shadows against the walls. I am releasing you, I said softly, my voice devoid of any mockery. It was a statement of fact. I tossed the burning match into the center of the room. It seemed to fall in slow motion, a tiny star descending into an abyss. The moment it touched the petrol-soaked floor, the air ignited with a dull, heavy hum. A wall of yellow and orange fire roared to life, instantly separating us. The heat was immediate and blistering. I stepped back, grabbed the heavy iron handle of the door, and slammed it shut. I spun the wheel, locking the mechanism tight. Stopwatch. From the other side, a scream erupted, not of fear, but of pure, undiluted agony and betrayal. It was a high, piercing shriek that vibrated through the steel. I release you, I whispered again to the cold metal. I walked away from the basement, ascending the stairs as the muffled sounds of the girl, the winner, echoed behind me. She was screaming and pounding on the door, but the sound grew fainter with every step I took towards the fresh night air. By the time I exited the factory, the screams had blended into the crackling roar of the fire consuming the room below. I didn't look back. For days passed after the fire. For days of numb silence.